Welcome to round one of NASAT 2018. My name is Ophir. We have Kentucky blue on the left and Maryland red on the right. We're going to get started with toss-up one. A character in this play tells another character that he represents the shells of the eggs that he is beating and complains about the dearth of good French comedies. A character in this play insists that a small mahogany table is found to replicate the room of a woman who was accused of using robe et manteau to lure good girls into her atelier. At the end of this play, a boy commits suicide with a revolver.
6 characters in search of an author.
Yes, 10. Here's your bonus. After its independence, Abu Bakr Balewa became its first prime minister. For 10 points each, name this country whose first republic ended when Balewa was overthrown by a 1966 coup d'etat. Answer: Nigeria. In 1967, the eastern portion of Nigeria declared independence as this abortive state. The creation of this state led to the Nigerian Civil War. Yes. The end of the Nigerian Civil War was marked by a speech given by Yakubu Gowon that included this 4-word phrase offering reconciliation. Answer: no victor, no vanquished. 10 points. Toss up 2. South African philosopher Grant Farid wrote that this thinker surprisingly resonated with his struggle against racism in his book on how this man saved my life. This man contended that theology is a positive science about faith worlds, whereas philosophy is critical. A late lecture by this thinker originated the dictum, language speaks, and he wrote an essay that examines Van Gogh's Peasant Shoes. This thinker's magnum opus begins with a discourse on the...
Heidegger?
Yes, 10 points. Bonus. This artist's vision of Ezekiel shows an orgiastic flurry of geometric humans tangled in faded pink with darker toned figures around the central crowd. For 10 points each, name this British vorticist artist whose painting The Mud Bath shows blue and white angular figures on a pink trapezoidal background with a brown central stripe. Answer: David Bomberg. This New York artist's work features brightly colored, rounded stick figures, usually with motion lines, as in his Radiant Baby motif. His artistic activism includes the mural Crack is Whack and his iconic Best Buddies, which shows 2 of his stick figures with arms over each other's shoulders.
Herring?
Yes. Much of Herring's work was trying to raise awareness of this disease, which took his life in 1990. The artistic collective Grand Fury created a poster with a pink triangle that says silence equals death as part of a campaign during this disease's crisis in the 1980s.
AIDS.
Yes. 20 points. House of 3. Suppliers of this good can take advantage of the Ellis Act, which circumvents some restrictions on removing this good. This good was the subject of Proposition F and Proposition I, also known as the Mission Moratorium, 2 failed ballot propositions that regulated the provision of this good. A plan to provide this good in Mountain View was forbidden by the City Council in order to protect the burrowing owls. Restrictions on the supply of this good include sunset laws that regulate the...
Alcohol?
No, -5. That regulate the casting of shadows, and a 40-foot maximum height law that was partially modified by Proposition D in 2015. Approximately 60,000 people per year leave the San Francisco area due to the high cost of this good. For 10 points, name this good whose namesake crisis is causing high rents throughout California.
Housing?
Yes. Bonus. A prophet disputes those that say the time has not yet come to rebuild this place in the first chapter of his namesake book. For 10 points each, name this edifice central to the disputes of the minor prophets. When construction started on this building and the glory of the Lord did not return, that prophet doubled down and said that it will surely come from this day on. Answer?
Second temple.
Yes. Those quotations come from this minor prophet, who demanded the reconstruction of the temple as a first priority along with Zechariah. Commenting on the Israelites prioritizing their own needs, he asked, "Is it a time to live in paneled houses while this house lies in ruins?"
Nehemiah.
Haggai. Haggai said that this man was like the Lord's signet ring after he laid the foundations of the second temple. He led the first group returning from the exile and was then the governor of the Persian province controlling Judea. Answer? Zerubbabel. 10 points. Toss-up 4. The flux of this compound into the atmosphere is described by the Penman-Monteith equation, which is modified by the Priestley-Taylor equation to be a function of only solar irradiance. The relationship between the partial pressure of this compound and temperature is described by the psychrometric constant. The phreatic zone has high levels of this compound, whose movement in the vadose zone is described by the Richards equation, which modifies Darcy's law. It's not carbon dioxide, but this compound is the most abundant greenhouse gas. Saturation excess and infiltration excess can
Water vapor.
Yes. 10. Bonus. When one of these objects was dropped from a canoe, the islanders agreed that it could still be used since it was certainly still down there on the ocean floor. For 10 points each, name these stone discs used as currency on the island of Yap. Since they are huge, they are generally left in one spot and traded through ownership rather than physical possession. Answer? Rye stones. Yap is located north of New Guinea, where this anthropologist did most of his research. This early anthropologist wrote Argonauts of the Western Pacific, one of the first books of social anthropology based on research about the Trobriand Islands off the coast of New Guinea. Malinowski examined this complex exchange system or gift economy where Trobriand Islanders travel long distances to give necklaces to other groups.
Cooler ring.
For 20. All right. Toss up 5. Until 1819, many of these places used Thomas Eddy's practice of awarding people a small sum of money called the overstint. A revolutionary one of these places in Philadelphia opened in 1829, used the separate system of operation, and had a single glass skylight that represented the eye of God. The Auburn system of organizing...
Prison.
Yes, 10. This system is commonly solved using the transfer matrix method. For 10 points each, name this model of ferromagnetism. According to it, spins on a lattice can only interact with their nearest neighbors. Answer? It's the Ising model. The Ising model is the simplest statistical model that describes one of these phenomena, one of which occurs at the Curie temperature. Boiling and melting are examples of this phenomenon between different states of matter.
Phase transition.
Yes. The first person to prove that the two-dimensional Ising model can undergo a phase transition was this physicist. He argued that the model can have two different net magnetizations at high and low temperature limits. Answer? Rudolf Peierls, 10 points. Toss up 6. After first having a career as a poet in France, thank you. After first having a career as a poet in France, an artist who worked in this country put sand in her paint and used the sgraffito technique to create hazy depictions of L'Église and the inner city. That artist was Alice Rahone. An artist who worked in this country painted Ulu's pants, the meal of Lord Candlestick, and a portrait of her one-time lover Max Ernst, and fled to this country after a breakdown that she narrated in her novel Down Below. Those artists, Remedios Varo and Leonora Carrington, began a relationship while living in its capital. An artist born in this country created the self-portraits What the Water Gave Me, and one with Thorn Necklace and...
Mexico.
Yes, 10 points. Bonus. This character asks, have you found any places where God would have felt at home? After someone says, we are living in a place abandoned by God. For 10 points each, name this character who gathers a peculiar herb and eats it in moments of great tension. Answer? William of Baskerville. William of Baskerville appears in this novel. At the end, Jorge kills himself by burning down the library. Answer? The Name of the Rose. The Name of the Rose was by this Italian novelist and critic. He wrote Foucault's Pendulum. Yes. 10 points. Toss up 8. No, 7. Sorry. This language was spoken by the powerful medieval merchant guild known as the Ainurovar. Speakers of this language ruled a dynasty that used Kolandia ships and constructed social classes based on who had to pay a land tax called Irai Kudigal. The king of a dynasty that spoke this language commissioned the Brihadisvara temple and won the Kandalur War. This language was spoken by the dynasty of Raja Raja I. The Chera, Pandya, and Chola dynasties were ruled by speakers of this language. Some of its speakers participated in a later organization founded by Velupillai Prabhakaran that assassinated Rajiv Gandhi. For 10 points, name a South Indian language spoken by an
Tamil.
Yes. Bonus. Two collectins that contribute to this substance's immune function are SPA and SPD. For 10 points each, name this lipopeptide that prevents the collapse of the lungs. Yes, surfactant is responsible for decreasing surface tension and increasing this parameter of the lung, which is the volume change per unit of pressure change. Compliance. Surfactant also prevents this phenomenon at the end of expiration. This word refers to collapse of the alveoli. Answer: atelectasis. 10. Toss-up 8. An altar to Apollo is set up to protect this object at the tomb of Sthenelus. While in Syrtis, 3 nymphs tell a hero to carry this thing until they reach the Garden of the Hesperides. Athena and Hera discuss this strategy while this object is hidden in the Phasis, and this thing is chased by Aspertus to the Brygian Islands. Diodorus described how this thing was created on Mount Pelion. This was the only object to successfully pass through the Planctae. Ovid says that part of this object was able to speak because it was taken from -5. Was taken from the wood of the shrine at Dodona. In a poem by Gaius Valerius Flaccus, it is said that there was nobody to look out for lights along the coastline before this thing was created. This craft's most famous journey was from Iolcos to Colchis. For 10 points, name this ship that carried Jason and his companions on the quest for the Golden Fleece.
The Argon.
Yes. Okay, bonus 8. After leaving the Jaguar house and a house of fire, the hero twins enter a house of these animals. For 10 points each, identify these animals that the Quiche called Zots. When Hunahpu sticks his head out of a blowpipe to check whether it is dawn, he is beheaded by a god of these animals, Kamazots. Answer? Bats. Having been beheaded by Kamazots, Hunahpu's head is used in this sporting activity, which in practice tended to use a rubber ball. Yes. After animals are summoned to bring food after the beheading of Hunahpu, this animal takes the place of his head.
Snake.
Turtle, tortoise. So 10 points. Toss-up 9. A medication that blocks movement of this ion is used to prevent a vasospasm after subarachnoid hemorrhage. High levels of this ion can cause the appearance of a J wave on an ECG, which is normally associated with hypothermia. A class of medications that block the movement of this ion are divided into dihydropyridine and non-dihydropyridine types, and includes both amlodipine and nifedipine. Those drugs block movement of this ion through L, T, and P or P/Q type channels. The mnemonic moans, groans, and stones describes a condition in which this ion is elevated due to overproduction of parathyroid hormone. Yes. This man advocated the motto, reformarse es vivir, or to reform oneself is to live. For 10 points each, name this non-fiction author of The Gallery of Prospero and the pan-Latin American idealist essay Ariel. Answer? Jose Enrique Rodo. Rodo, like the author of History of a Troubled Life, Horacio Quiroga, was from this South American country. Answer? Uruguay. Quiroga wrote a collection titled For Stories of Love, Madness, and This Phenomenon. In an Ariel Dorfman play titled For This Thing and the Maiden, Paulina Salas tries to get Dr. Miranda to confess to rape.
No.
Yes, 10. Toss up. 10. This poem describes the hour when lips that would kiss form prayers to broken stone, and says that those stone images receive the supplication of a dead man's hand under the twinkle of a fading star. This poem says the eyes reappear as the perpetual star, multifoliate star of death's twilight kingdom. One of this poem's epigraphs references Guy Fawkes and says a penny for the old guy, and the other epigraph quotes from Heart of Darkness. A nursery rhyme-like section of this poem says, "Here we go round the prickly pear," and its last section alternates between "For thine is the kingdom" and "Life."
Hollow Man.
Yes. This man interviewed the neighbors of the subject of one of his biographies, who told him stories about how he had cut down a cherry tree as a child. For 10 points each, name this first biographer of George Washington. The answer? Parson Weems. This constitutional scholar and president of Princeton University wrote an 1896 biography of George Washington that critiqued some of the claims made by Parson Weems. Answer? Woodrow Wilson. This American historian won a Pulitzer Prize for his Washington, A Life. His biography of Alexander Hamilton was used by Lin-Manuel Miranda as a source for Hamilton, on which he is credited as a production assistant. Ron Chernow, so 0. And that's halftime. The score I have is 90 for Kentucky Blue and 110 for Maryland Red. Yeah. All right. Ready for the second half? Toss up 11. When Orthodox priests do this action for another person, they use the same ICXC position as the one found in the Pantocrator icon. Tertullian wrote that we wear out our foreheads by performing an early variant of this practice, which may have survived as the motion done in the Catholic Mass before the Gospel reading. It's not bowing, but old believers objected to Patriarch Nikon's changes to this practice, and reformed it the old way as a protest when arrested. Most Eastern Christian traditions do this with the 2 fingers touching the thumb, moving from right to left, while Western traditions...
Like signing the cross.
Yes. In this short story, Mel McGinnis talks about an elderly couple that was injured in a car accident. For 10 points each, name this short story by Raymond Carver. In Mel's story, the elderly man is upset because he can't see his wife through the eye holes of his bandages. Answer? The phrase "what we talk about when we talk about" has become a meme of sorts in literature. Nathan Englander was a finalist for the Pulitzer Prize for Fiction for his short story collection, What We Talk About When We Talk About This Person. Answer? Anne Frank. What We Talk About When We Talk About Anne Frank was originally published in this magazine. John Hersey's Hiroshima was first published in this magazine. Answer? Yes. 20. All right, toss up 12. George Odom showed how to obtain this number using an inscribed equilateral triangle by drawing a chord between the midpoints of 2 of its sides and extending it to meet the circle. When this number is used as a numerical base, every integer terminates, but every fraction is non-terminating. In that base, the digit sequence 1, 1 is avoided because it equals 1, 0, 0. This number can be called the most irrational because each level of its continued fraction has the same largest magnitude of difference. In other words, its continued fraction has only ones in its denominators. Based on that, this number can be found algebraically by solving the equation x equals 1 over the term 1 plus x. By definition, the square of this number equals 1 plus itself. For 10 points, give this constant the limit of the ratio of... Yes. Your bonus. Geza Anda's recording of this movement was used in the film Elvira Madigan. For 10 points each, Identify this F major movement from a certain C major concerto by Mozart. Please specify both the concerto and the number of the movement.
Mozart's piano concerto number.
Sorry, it's piano concerto number 21, second movement. This movement from a certain Brahms concerto in D major is often performed with the cadenza by Joseph Joachim that was used at the premiere.
First movement of his violin concerto.
Yes. The first movement of this man's piano concerto number 1 in B flat minor opens with the trombones playing F, D flat, C, B flat, and the piano's huge entrance of 3 ascending D flat major block chords. This composer wrote Marche Slave and the Pathétique Symphony.
Tchaikovsky's piano concerto number 1.
Yeah, Tchaikovsky is fine. 20 points. Toss-up 13. This composer wrote actual notes above the following melody of half and a quarter note triplets: long B flat, low C sharp, low E, long high E flat, C. A triple piano string chorale slowly shifts between widely spaced, non-dominant diatonic chords to form the static background of a piece by this composer. This composer's 2 contemplations initially paired that piece. Yes. Answer the following about Grignard reagents, for 10 points each. Grignard reagents are formed by reacting halides with this metal. Magnesium. That reaction is conducted in a solvent, one of which is this compound. Its formula is C4H8O. Answer: tetrahydrofuran. The production of fluorine-containing Grignard reagents requires metal powders named for this scientist. Answer: it's Reuben Rica, so 0 points. Toss-up 14. Thomas Munson was credited with helping to save this industry in France. John the 22nd erected a castle whose name refers to a product of this industry that developed during the Avignon papacy. Francois Clicquot's widow helped develop the riddling technique used in part of this industry. Napoleon's Minister of the Interior, Jean-Antoine Chaptal, recommended the use of sugar instead of lead acetate in this industry. This industry was severely damaged by the introduction of the phylloxera insect from the United States, which prompted the drafting of many plants onto resistant rootstock. For 10 points, name this industry that traditionally has centers in Burgundy, Bordeaux, and Champagne. Yes. A member of this group, Aristoteles, is an interlocutor in the Parmenides. For 10 points each, name these oligarchs who were installed as rulers of Athens after Sparta won the Peloponnesian War. They were overthrown after 8 months by Thrasybulus, who restored democracy to the city. This leader of the 30 tyrants executed his fellow tyrant Theramenes for protesting the mass executions. This relative of Plato lends his name to a dialogue about Atlantis that follows the Timaeus. Answer? No, Critias. At one time, Critias was a student of this philosopher who disobeyed an order by the 30 to turn over Leon of Salamis for execution. This teacher of Plato was later executed himself for corrupting the youth of Athens. Yes, 20. Right. Toss-up 15. A critic from this country identified its greatest narrative poem as Brebeuf and His Brethren by E.J. Pratt. That critic from this country wrote that its early literature is distinguished by the need to build a bulwark against the world and the imagination, which he called a garrison mentality. Another critic wrote that the central character of this nation's literature is the victim, and she outlined 4 victim positions in her book Survival. The Bush Garden is by a critic from this country, Northrop Frye. In a novel from this country, the protagonist sees her friend Moira at a brothel called Jezebel's and women's...
Canada?
Yes. Solving the matrix equation pi times the matrix P equals the matrix P gives rise to the invariant one of these constructs for a Markov chain. For 10 points each, a Markov chain can be characterized by a transition matrix and the initial one of these constructs for the first state. General examples of these things include the binomial and Poisson types. If a Markov chain has this property, then given any starting state, the chain will eventually return to it. The random walks on the integers z and on the lattice z squared have this property, but the random walk on z cubed has the opposite of this property, which is called transience. Answer? Recurrent. Those results for random walks in z to the n can be proven using this approximation for the factorial function. This approximation, named for a Scottish mathematician, says that the log of n factorial is around n log n minus n. Yes, 20. All right, after 15, the score is now 90 to 240. In a church in this state in the 1890s, Charles Sheldon preached a sermon that first popularized the question, what would Jesus do? Legendarily, John Wesley Hardin shot a man in this state just for snoring. This state was where temperance crusader Carrie Nation first began her violent destruction of saloons. It was the primary destination of exodusters, or...
Kansas.
Yes. Answer the following about the life and work of philosopher Janet Radcliffe Richards. In bioethics, Radcliffe Richards defended this practice against accusations that it results from coercion by poverty and argued that banning it, as most countries do, produces black markets. Nancy Shepherd Hughes leads an organization against this practice.
Prostitution.
No, selling human organs. Radcliffe Richards first made her reputation with a book written as part of this movement, but from a skeptical perspective. Simone de Beauvoir's The Second Sex was a touchstone for the second wave of this movement. This longtime partner of Radcliffe Richards imagined being very gradually turned into Greta Garbo to argue for a reductive account of personal identity in reasons and persons. Answer? Derek Parfit, 10 points. This phenomenon can cause quartz wind when it occurs in air in an attenuation effect also known as Eckhart streaming. Actuators based on this phenomenon have been proposed for manipulating highly pure compounds without contamination. The SOFAR channel can be used to increase the range of this phenomenon. This phenomenon can be used to efficiently mix non-homogeneous suspensions and accelerate chemical reactions by initiating a type of non-inertial cavitation. The speed of propagation of this phenomenon is given as the square root of the bulk modulus over density by the Newton-Laplace equation, and the Prandtl-Glauert singularity arises due to the assumption of linearity at that speed. This phenomenon is studied in acoustics, and it is used to detect objects in sonar. For 10 points, name this phenomenon whose speed defines Mach 1. Yes. This character pretends to be the father of a dying girl after a shipwreck in order to calm her in her last moments. For 10 points each, name this British military officer, a devout Catholic who commits suicide rather than renounce his affair with Helen. His wife Louise is told that nobody can know a man's heart or God's mercy when she tries to rationalize this man's death. Major Henry Scobie. Major Scobie is the main character of this novel, in which he searches ships such as the Portuguese Esperança for smuggled diamonds and deals with the black market trader Yusuf. Answer? The Heart of the Matter. The Heart of the Matter was written by this English author who also penned The End of the Affair and The Power and the Glory. Yes. 10. In the last act of this play, one of its characters appears clean-shaven and well-dressed for the first time, but can't choke out any coherent words. A character in this play is repeatedly surprised that people know what the fried bread she made is, and serves up cornflakes for breakfast until she runs out. In an interrogation in this play, another character is asked, is the number 846 necessary or possible, and answers both. A character knows that she was the belle of the ball at the title event of this play, which Petey skipped to play chess, but which Goldberg and McCann were glad to attend.
Birthday party?
Yes. The Seibert Commission of 1887, a group emanating from the University of Pennsylvania, denounced these people, for 10 points each. Name these people such as Cora L. V. Scott and the Fox sisters, the latter of whom claimed to use the rapping technique. These people were especially popular in the age of antebellum reform, frequently among radical Quakers. Answer?
Abolitionists.
Spiritualists or mediums. Much early interest in spiritualism began in this state. A burned-over district in this state was where many religious ideas, such as those of the Millerites, began.
New York.
Yep. This president's wife, Mary Todd, was especially interested in spiritualism and conducted seances in the White House during wartime.
Lincoln.
Yes, for 20. 19. A media studies theory named in part for this response includes the notion that the four uses of media are diversion, personal relationships, personal identity, and surveillance. That theory is named for uses and this reaction. In fMRI studies of the ability to control this reaction by B.J. Casey, images of happy, neutral, and afraid faces were displayed. Casey revealed that the ability to control this emotion is tied to activation of the anterior prefrontal cortex as opposed to the ventral striatum. A study of this response performed at the Bing Nursery School found that it was significantly correlated to life outcomes. In that study, Ebba Ebbesen and Walter Mischel offered a choice between one marshmallow now or two marshmallows later. For 10 points, name this sensation of fulfillment that is delayed by individuals.
Gratification.
Yes. This character's performance in the opera Salammbô is panned for 10 points each. Name this character whose husband finishes writing a review of her performance in the New York Inquirer. Answer. Susan Alexander Kane. Susan's husband, Charles Foster Kane, is portrayed by Citizen Kane in Citizen Kane by this actor, who also directed the film.
Wells.
When Charles Foster Kane dies, this object falls out of his hand. Along with the sled Rosebud, it represents Kane's lost past life.
Snowball.
20. Final toss-up. The castrati Senesino and Gaetano Berenstadt premiered roles by this composer in an opera in which a natural horn opens the aria Va tacito e nascosto. This composer included the aria Se bramate in an opera that puzzled listeners because it included many short ariosos rather than three-part da capo arias. Ptolemaeo's sister Cleopatra plots to depose him and become the sole ruler of Egypt in one of his operas. In one of his operas, the Saracen king Argante falls in love with the captive Almirena, who sings Lascia ch'io pianga. A comically over-earnest largo aria sung to a plane tree opens this composer's opera Circe. That aria is Ombra mai fu. Rinaldo and Giulio Cesare are operas by, for 10 points, what German-born Baroque composer of the Harmonious Blacksmith and... Yes. In 2012, Google Earth confirmed that the largest island in a lake in an island in a lake in an island, or third-order island, was actually deep within Victoria Island in Arctic Canada. For 10 points each. Name this largest island in the Philippines. It contains Taal Lake, which contains a volcanic island, which contains a crater lake, which contains the small island of Vulcan Point, previously thought to be the largest third-order island. The largest second-order island is Treasure Island in Lake Mindamoya, which is on this largest lake island, a Canadian possession in Lake Huron. Answer? Manitoulin Island. This largest first-order island is not located in a lake, but in the North Atlantic and Arctic Oceans. It is a constituent country within the Kingdom of Denmark.
Greenland.
Yes, 20. The score is 170 for Kentucky Blue and 290 for Maryland Red. Great game.
Okay, our next board that's where you